the period between 1930 and 1933 is not only crucial for the history of the civil rights for the depressed classes in India, but it's also a very crucial period for the Indian nation, because this is a formative period in which the whole foundation of the future or the political future of India was determined, and therefore this period has in its roots and in its events the seeds of the future political development of India. Because prior to this period, the Simon Commission, which was constituted in order to review the Act of 1919, which is known as the Montfort Reform, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar worked with the Simon Commission. But he not only cooperated or worked with the Simon Commission, but also he was very critical of the Simon Commission wherever he found the ideas or the thoughts of the Commission not compatible with the future or the political future of this country. So when after the Simon Commission's report, a debate or a discussion was to be held in London to discuss the findings or the review of the Simon Commission as to what will be the political future of India. The first roundtable conference began in the late 1930, and as we have seen, Babasaheb Ambedkar was invited to the roundtable conference as a delegate. So he sailed from Bombay and he went to London, and on his way to London he was keeping in track with all the developments that were taking place in India through his very trusted lieutenant, whose name is Mr. Shivtarkar. So Shivtarkar wrote later to Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar when Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar was abroad. In the first roundtable conference, 2 delegates were invited from the depressed classes, and the another delegate for this first round of the roundtable conference was R.R. Srinivas. He was a member of Madras Presidency, and he was a very close friend of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. The Congress boycotted the Simon Commission, but the Muslims, the Sikhs, Christians, untouchables, and the leaders of the Hindu Mahasabha attended the first round of the roundtable conference, which was held in London in 1930. In this first round, various committees were constituted in order to discuss various organs of the political processes. One of the main important point in the discussion during the entire rounds of the roundtable conference was how the political power will be distributed among the Indians. What is going to be the formula, or what is going to be the process by which the power which was to be eventually transferred to the Indians will be distributed among the Indians. So a minority commission or minority committee was also formed. So in the first roundtable conference, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar spoke very passionately. In fact, he criticized the British government for not doing anything for the untouchables for 150 years. And he questioned the Britishers as to what happened to their rule of law, what happened to their doctrine of equality, what happened to the doctrine of the justice. So he very straightforwardly challenged the British government in the first round of the Round Table Conference. He also met a lot of members of Parliament, the British Parliament, in order to talk to them, in order to update them, in order to put forward his case on the behalf of the depressed classes. And speaking on the occasions before he left for Bombay, he made it clear to his people that his only point is to get the political rights for the untouchables. And he said that two of them will do everything in England, in London, to get the political rights for the depressed classes. At the same time, when he was in the first round of the Round Table Conference, the delegates, the British members of the Round Table were very impressed by the arguments that Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar put forth. So he not only impressed the assembly with his argumentation on the behalf of the depressed classes, but his whole ideas of the adult franchise, his ideas of the fundamental rights, his ideas about the political system impressed so much that he came to sit in the three important committees that were constituted in the Round Table Conference. And all these three committees were so important, were so pivotal importance that they steered, as it were, the political future of the country. On November 1930, on 30th November 1930, the New York Times published a longer article on Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. And that news was about the Maharaja of Baroda, Sayajirao Maharaj, arranging a dinner party in order to honor Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar in London. And the caption of that news which appeared, or a small article that appeared in the New York Times, was "Prince and Outcast at Dinner in London to End Age-Old Barrier." And New York Times very clearly stated the importance of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, of his role that he was playing in order to get the rights for the depressed classes. The subcaptions, as it were, of that big article was very interesting. Scholar wars on stigma. New York Times called Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar a scholar. Not only that, but they also published the stories of his own suffering. And it was, in short, a story of Babasaheb's life in a few paragraphs as to how he fought against the age-old caste system and how he won 2 degrees at 2 famous universities. So that article not only talked about the problems of the untouchables, but it also put in place or put in perspective Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar's view about the future of the entire political process and the future of the depressed classes in that political process. That article was written by Charles Sheldon. And the place where this dinner was hosted is located at the Hyde Park Hotel. So we can see from this particular event as to how Babasaheb Ambedkar was campaigning, as how he was trying to mobilize the support in order to further the cause of the depressed classes. Not only that, but when he left for England, he very clearly said that he would not only campaign in London, but also, if he can, he will go to Russia and talk to the people there. If he can, he will go to Germany to talk to the people. In fact, he wrote a letter to a very famous institute in New York, requesting through one British MP to get him invited for a talk on the depressed classes. So he is not only participating in the debates or the discussions that are being held under the umbrella of the Round Table Conference, but he is also lobbying with people all around, with journalists, with the member of parliament, and with the very important prominent citizens. So the first round was completed and Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar came back to India. And he became very instantly popular after the first round of the conference. When he came to India, the people from the depressed classes gave him a very warm welcome, and lot of them went to Ballard Pier in order to welcome their leader. When he was traveling from London following the Marseilles route, when he came to India and he was traveling in a boat, he was accompanied by the members of the franchise committee. Now this franchise committee is very important as far as the political future of this country is concerned. Because this committee looked into the rights of the citizen, the rights of the franchise, universal suffrage, and a lot of issues. And Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar was one of the members of the franchise committee. So Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar came back to India and something very interesting happened. The news of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar's success came back home, and Congress began to see that how the political future of the depressed classes in India is going to unfold. Gandhi went to the second round conference. But before that, before the period, or in between the period between the first round of the conference and the second round of the conference, very important events took place. During this time, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar met Gandhi for the first time on August 14 in 1931. And the meeting took place at Mani Bhavan in Malabar Hills in Bombay. So this is a very important dialogue between Gandhi and Ambedkar, where Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar is arguing in favor of the separate electorate for the untouchables. In this very famous dialogue, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar told Gandhi that he has no homeland because there is no self-help, there is no self-respect for his community in this country. In this famous meeting, he made a very important statement. He said, history tells that Mahatmas, like fleeting phantoms, raise dust but raise no level. History tells that Mahatmas, like fleeting phantoms, raise dust but raise no level. Further, during his discussion, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar emphasized the importance of treating the untouchables as separate from the Hindus, because they were not Hindus, and that was the basis of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar's politics, that the untouchables were not Hindus, they were a separate categories than the Hindus. Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar also stressed that the Muslims and the Sikhs are socially, politically and economically more advanced than the untouchables. Therefore, the untouchables need to have the separate electorate, because they are the laggards in the social, political and economic sphere. They should be included in the scheme of separate electorate. Gandhi very categorically and very emphatically told Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar that he is against the political separation of the untouchables from the Hindus. So he made it very clear in his meeting with Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar that he is against political separation of the untouchables from the Hindus. So in this pretext, a second round of the Round Table Conference was to be held in England, same period, at the end of the year 1932, and Gandhi participated in this second round of the Round Table Conference. A minority committee was formed in order to discuss the political process leading to the distribution of power to the Indians. And Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar and Gandhi were also the members of this minority commission, which was headed by then British Premier Ramsay MacDonald. And Ramsay MacDonald was the leader of the Labour Party, and the party came into the power after the World War I. And Ramsay MacDonald has a very important, very useful career. He was also involved in the communist movement for some time. In fact, he participated in the second conference of the communists. So there was a discussion and debate going on in London in the second round of the Round Table Conference, and Gandhi wanted to suspend the minority committee for a few days, because the position of the untouchables were established for the future political process in India. It was established because Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar argued and he pleaded the case so well that the untouchables were taken into consideration in the future political process of the country. But Gandhi wanted to suspend this committee, and in fact he got it adjourned on October 1st, and he started negotiating with the other members of the minority committee. He started negotiating with the Muslims. He started negotiating with the Sikhs. He started negotiating with the European Christians. And Gandhi failed to reach any compromise between the Sikhs and the Muslims. He was ready to give anything to the Muslims and the Sikhs, but nothing to the untouchables. That was his rallying point of his negotiation with the Muslim leaders and with the Sikh leaders. It's a very interesting story as to how Gandhi tried to turn the minds of the Muslims and the Sikhs so that they won't support Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar's proposal in the minority committee. But as it happened, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar became very successful in forging alliances with not only Muslims but also Anglo-Indians and European Christians. He became so successful. Because of his negotiating skills, he became so successful that he got the support of the Muslims, Anglo-Indians and the European Christians. And when the meeting was resumed, when the minority committee meetings were resumed, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar and Srinivas were asked to draft a memorandum, and very readily these two drafted a memorandum with a demand of separate electorate with reserved seats for the untouchables. The only point that Gandhi raised is this, that he declined or he denied to accept Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar as the leader of the untouchables. He said that I am the sole representative of the untouchables because I am from the Congress party, and Congress party is looking after the interest of the Hindus, and therefore I am the sole representative of the untouchables. Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar has no support. But as it happened, hundreds of telegrams were sent from all over India to England in order to establish the fact that Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar is the sole representative of the untouchables. So Gandhi failed very miserably in his negotiations. He couldn't rally the support of the Muslims, Anglo-Indians and European Christians in his favor. He also declined to support the proceedings of the minority committee, and a kind of deadlock was attained. So Ramsay MacDonald, who was the president of the minority commission, decided to solve the deadlock, and he said that he will look into the matter and will give his own award in this particular issue as the president of the minority committee. When Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar and R.R. Srinivasan submitted a scheme of separate electorate, they demanded the reserved seats for the untouchables with separate electorate, and also they put a clause in their memorandum that this particular scheme will be submitted for referendum after 20 years. So after 20 years, this scheme will be submitted to all the citizens for referendum, and their views will be taken into view as to whether it has to be continued or not. So we can see a very sharp mind at work, not only in terms of the negotiating with the people, but also in terms of drafting the memorandum. A very powerful mind is at work. So the matter of distribution of power could not be solved in the second round of the round table conference, because Gandhi was very adamant in granting the political rights to the untouchables, and therefore because the deadlock arose, it was left to the president of the minority commission and to his conscience to determine the future of this process. Dr. Babasaheb didn't arrive at particular sort of memorandum of his own, but he always consulted with the people. Like, for example, there was a committee session which was held when L.N. Hardas was very active. He was very instrumental in arranging the committee session of the depressed classes, the Congress of the depressed classes. So during this period, between the second round of the round table conference, which ended at the end of 1932 and in the beginning of 1931 and in the beginning of 1932, a lot of things started happening in India. Congress started playing role in terms of setting a few untouchable leaders against Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. It's their policy even today. Not only that, but the Hindu nationalists also came into the field, and they started opposing the deal that was going to be in favor of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. So they handpicked M.C. Raja from Madras, who was the opponent of R.R. Srinivasan. And he was annoyed because he couldn't go to the round table conference. So M.C. Raja was set against Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar and Srinivasan. And Mr. Gawai of Maharashtra started opposing Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. And he was handpicked by the Congress to oppose Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar and his great movement. So in between, inter alia, a pact was signed between Raja and a Brahman from Nagapur, Munje, which is famous in the history as Munje-Raja Pact, according to which the demand for the separate electorate was to be foregone, and in that place a scheme of joint electorate was to be put in place. So M.C. Raja wrote to Ramsay MacDonald, conveying him that this is the most important pact between Munje and myself, and you must pay heed to that, and don't agree with Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar's scheme, but agree with our scheme of joint electorate. He also started contesting the fact that Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar is the leader of the untouchables. But Ramsay MacDonald did not listen to Munjay and Raja Pact. He did not pay any heed to the proposal. And of his own judgment, Ramsay MacDonald, the hero of the time, not only for us but for the even British people, granted an award declaring the separate electorate for the untouchables, and that was a great victory. So not only the untouchables but Muslims and also Sikhs got the separate electorate. When this MacDonald Award was declared, Gandhi was in jail in this particular town of Pune. He was in jail, in Erawada jail. And he was very desperate not to give any political representation to the untouchables. And he started his epic fast, which is known in the history as the Pune fast, where Gandhi sat for the fast unto the death. He said that unless my demands are made, I will not eat and I will die. So Gandhi opposed the Pune Pact, and Gandhi sent or issued a very important statement, and I am going to read a part of it. In reaction to the communal award, Gandhi wrote, "The untouchables are part of an indivisible family. There is a subtle something quite indefinable in Hinduism which keeps them in it even in spite of themselves." Now Gandhi is playing the game of the words. He is using the words in order to camouflage his real intention to keep away the so-called untouchables from the political power. He says there is subtle something quite indefinable. The language that Gandhi is using is so dubious and is so abstract that it doesn't make any sense to the sane human beings. He says there is a subtle something quite indefinable in Hinduism which keeps them in it even in spite of themselves. Now we all know what is that subtle something which keeps us with the Hindus. It's the power of the force, or it's the power of the religious authority, or it's the fear of oppression that keeps us together with the caste Hindus. There is no other subtle something which keeps us with the caste Hindus. And this fact makes it imperative for a man like me with a living experience of it. He has the living experience of it. That there is subtle something which is not definable, and he has the living experience of it, to resist this contemplated separation, even though this effort should cost life itself. So he is ready to die in order to save, in order to stop the untouchables from getting the political rights. On the second day of his fast against communal award, Gandhi made a very, very derogatory statement. He said, untouchable hooligans means gundas. He said, untouchable hooligans will make common cause with Muslim hooligans and kill caste Hindus. So here he abused the two communities. He called the untouchables the hooligans, and also he called the Muslims the hooligans. And he said that these two hooligans will come together and kill the caste Hindus. Now where is that subtle something which kept the untouchables in the Hindu fold? Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar did not want to give concessions to Gandhi, and he was very adamant on his position because he fought, he worked very hard, day and night, he struggled so much in order to arrive at this position to have some political power for the depressed classes. He didn't budge from his place. But then there was a huge social pressure on him, and he was the most hated man by the caste, Hindus, and by Congress of that period. They didn't realize what Dr. Ambedkar was doing in terms of the political future of India in the round table conferences. He was talking about the adult franchise, which nobody talked. He was talking about giving political rights to all citizens in India. He was making strong cases for the democracy in India. And there Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar remarked that I am the most hated person in India today, but in future people will realize that there was no patriot like me in this country. And the time has proved that he was right. So, if we look at this particular period in the history, it's very important. So, there was the Congress organized a conference in Bombay which was titled as Conference of Hindu and the Untouchables. Now, the title of the conference is suggestive to the fact that the caste Hindus in the Congress were considering untouchables as separate from the Hindus. And there are many testimonies which Dr. Ambedkar noted which points to the fact that the upper caste did not consider untouchables to be the Hindus. So, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar came to Pune. As I said you in the beginning, as I told you in the beginning, that Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar was also the member of the franchise committee, and because he was a member of the franchise committee, he was traveling everywhere in India in order to look at the issues, in order to take the testimonies of the people as to what will be the future of India, the political future of India. So in 1932, he went to Madras and he made a very important statement in Madras that believe in the Buddha and Ramanuj. During this period, in one of the very important speeches, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar was asked, what does he think about his success in his life? He said, I would consider my life to be successful if I could make this or my untouchable brothers and sisters into the human beings. That was supposed to be the success of his life, to make us into the human beings. So Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar came to Pune and he stayed in a hotel and he was speaking very directly. And he said very cynically and somewhat jokingly, who was the Mahatma to fast? Who was the Mahatma to fast? Let him come and have dinner with me. It's a very comic statement, but it makes sense. And because of the pressure that was exerted on Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar decided to compromise. And it was a very sad decision for him to compromise the interest of his community. Has he not compromised at that point of time, there would have been a riot-like situation. So Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar agreed to compromise, and people like P. Balu played a role in brokering the future draft. So Pune Pact did away the pact which was signed in Pune, which is known as Pune Pact in 19 September 1932. Separate electorate were taken away, and instead of that, reserved seats were given to the depressed classes. The initial scheme of 71 reserved seats was denied, and instead of that, 148 reserved seats were to be given to the depressed classes. Dr. Ambedkar very bitterly accepted it because the reserved seats had a very ineffective scheme in favor of the untouchables. The initial scheme gave 2 votes to the untouchables to elect their own representative and also vote in the general constituency. So it gave a power to the untouchables. They can elect their own representative, at the same time they can vote in the general constituency. But in the reserved seats, the untouchables in the primary elections could elect 4 people who will get the maximum votes, and those 4 people will contest in the general electorate. Now, if you look at the scheme, wherever there were the reserved seats, the 4 candidates, among the 4 candidates, the topmost candidates were from the Scheduled Caste Federation in the future. But when they came to the general constituency, the candidate from the Congress party won the election. So the total effect of the separate electorate was nullified by the Pune Pact. And Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar made very famous statements after that. He said, in accepting the Pune Pact, you accept the position that you are Hindus. So he was not ready to accept the position that the untouchables are the Hindus. He took a position very strongly that the untouchables were not the Hindus. Now we are talking about 1932, but in 1929 in the Jalgaon conference, the conference of the depressed classes declared that they won't be Hindu, they can't be Hindu. They said that let's accept any other religion, but not Hinduism. We are not Hindus. Not only that, but Babasaheb Ambedkar made a very important statement in respect to the Pune Pact. He said that I went to London and I brought an orange for my people with very hard labor. I brought an orange from London for my people. Gandhi took the orange and he took juice, all the juice out of that orange, and he threw the rinds at my people. Gandhi took the whole juice out of the apple or out of the orange and threw the rind at my people. That's what Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar said. After the Pune Pact, the 3rd round of the Round Table Conference was held in 1933. Dr. Ambedkar participated in the 3rd round of the Round Table Conference, and that was to take into consideration all the findings of the various committees that were created by the first round. So it was the whole sum total of these committees were taken into account, and a very important legal framework was brought into India in 1935, which became the basis of the future Constitution of India. So Government of India Act 1935 is the bedrock of the future Constitution of India, which is the outcome of the Round Table Conferences. And as you have seen that Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar participated very sincerely, very seriously in all the rounds of the conferences. He was not only concerned for the rights of the depressed classes or for their future in the political process. He was not only concerned for as to how the power will be distributed among the Indians, but he was also concerned with the future of this country. After the Pune Pact, Gandhi set up All India Anti-Untouchable League with budget of rupees 6 lakhs. He got money from Birla, G.D. Birla, and he started campaign to support the untouchables. However, in a few states, a bill was introduced to abolish the untouchability. And Dr. Ambedkar was asked to support the abolition of untouchability. And Dr. Ambedkar said that unless we abolish the caste system, we cannot abolish the untouchability. Because it's a caste is a system. So unless you establish, unless you demolish, or unless you annihilate the caste system, you can't annihilate the practice of untouchability, and therefore he suggested that a bill to be passed should be aimed at abolition of the Chaturvarna. Gandhi opposed that. Gandhi said that Chaturvarna is the foundation of the Hindu society. If you abolish Chaturvarna, the whole Hinduism will collapse. And here in the famous interaction, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar asked Gandhi whether he wants Chaturvarna like this or like this. Gandhi didn't reply. Some future leaders in India wanted to change the Chaturvarna system into this. They wanted to turn it upside down, and that was their rallying point of the politics. He also, later this All India Anti-Untouchability League was converted into Harijan Sevak Sangha. And Gandhi started a newspaper titled as the Harijan. But as you can understand, the intention of all this maneuvering was to ensure that the Congress gets the political support of the untouchables. Now, out of the reserve seats that were granted by the Pune Pact to the untouchables, there were 148 seats, but they were later extended. But even then, even if there were the reserved seats, the representation was quite low, as you will see from the numbers which I am going to read for you. In the upper chamber of the House or the Council of State, or what we call Rajya Sabha today, there were 7 reserved seats out of 150 seats. It's nothing. There were to be in the lower house, what we call today Lok Sabha, 19 seats out of 250 seats, which is nothing. The legislative assemblies in the provincial councils, there were about 9 British provinces. And then there was a council of the princes, because there were 563 princely states. So there was a council of the princes. But 9 provinces, the representation for the depressed classes or the untouchables was 151 seats out of 1,585 seats. So if you look at the representation which were granted to the depressed classes through the Pune Pact was meager, which was in reality no representation. This is, as I said in the beginning, a very crucial period in the formation of India as a nation state. And it's also a very crucial period to understand the sharpness of mind of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar and his negotiating skill and his tireless energies and various strategies that he put in place in order to get the political power to the depressed classes.